Hey, welcome back to 100 Horror Movies. Today we are going over The Phantom Carriage, which is a 1921 Swedish film that was based off of the novel Thy Soul Shall Bear Witness. I have been having trouble with that tongue twister all morning. This film is known for its special effects and its storytelling technique of flashbacks inside of flashbacks. The special effects kind of triggered a thought in my brain. For example, my question is, if they had the ability to do a image over an image in 1921 like this, why weren't they using subtitles instead of the title cards? I feel like there are a lot of dialogue beats that we miss waiting for the title card to come in. One of my favorite title card images during this movie had me cracking up, and it's this one right here. When I tell you that I laughed so loud and almost fell off the couch at this, I am not exaggerating. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. And the fact that it's Swedish title cards leads to a very interesting end title card. You know, it's not the end. I've seen La Fin or El Fin or whatever, just Fin. This one has a very unique ending title card. This movie was released on January 1st of 1921 in Sweden, which goes along with the plot of this movie. The movie takes place in the last really couple of minutes of New Year's Eve, if you don't count the flashbacks for it. So, with that being said, let's jump right into how we're introduced to this film. The movie opens with a scene of a very sick and dying Salvation Army nurse named Sister Edith, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's E-D-I-T, which I feel like Edith, but we'll see, maybe. And Sister Edith has one last dying wish on her deathbed, and it's to talk to a gentleman named David Holm, who she met a year ago today. She sends an officer friend of hers to go retrieve him, and this guy is total garbage. I hated this character almost immediately. We cut to seeing David getting drunk with a couple of his buddies in a graveyard, and he's telling them a story about his friend George's and a belief that George's held, which he heard of prior to this. And this is where we get our first flashback to at least over a year in the past, if I said that right. George's is telling us about this Phantom Carriage, and now we're getting not a flashback, but another story within the flashback, which I think takes way longer than they needed to for this, but I'll comment about that at the end. We also find out that George's passed away a year ago today on New Year's Eve. Eerie. It's at about this time that the officer shows up in the graveyard and tells David about Sister Edith's last request. And David refuses to go. The officer leaves, and his two friends try to convince him that he should go see Sister Edith before it's too late. And a fight breaks out between the three of them, and David is killed. The escalation in this scene happens so fast that I had to rewind and make sure I didn't miss anything. David is hit over the head with a bottle, falls down, and dies as the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve. David's spirit starts to separate from his body just as the Phantom Carriage is pulling up to collect his soul. And as the driver steps down, we see that it is his good friend George, who passed away 1 year ago. George apologizes to David and says that it is all his fault, and at this moment I was very, very confused. But he goes on to explain that he remembers before he had befriended David, David had everything you could ask for. He had a great relationship with his brother, he had a loving wife, he had 2 beautiful children, they were happy, everything was going perfect. But George's kind of turned him on to drinking and overindulging in drinking to the point where both David and his brother were arrested for public drunkenness. And while they were serving their time for that, his brother had killed somebody in prison and got a longer sentence, so he was not being released anytime soon. So as David is released from prison, he's lost his brother. He arrives home to find out that his wife and 2 kids are no longer there. The missus grabbed the children and left before David could come home for a happy reunion. He swears to get revenge and to show her what it's like to have your heart broken as his currently is. He spends some time searching all across Sweden until New Year's Eve. He ends up at a Salvation Army, a brand new Salvation Army mission, where he meets Sister Edith for the very first time. And he is dirty, he is sick, his clothes are all torn, he is a mess. But Sister Edith lets him in and is honored and happy to have the first person that needs help at this mission, and she is bent on, I almost said hell-bent, and I stopped myself because I don't think that's the right term when talking about a nun or a sister or whatever. She is very animate about him getting all the help she can give. But he is very much a jerk. She's gone above and beyond to do everything she can to make sure that this total jerk gets a better start to the new year. So I am awarding her the I Am a Good Person title card, which is new to these series, and it is my honor to give her this one right here. This is for you, Sister Edith. And even though he was being a jerk to her, once he falls asleep, she does not 1, but 2 amazingly kind-hearted things. First is that she prays for God to give him an amazing new year. And the second is that she patches up his jacket, the dirty, grimy, torn jacket. She patches it up and sews it the best she can to make it look so much more presentable. The next morning when he's getting ready to leave, she asks for one favor. She asks him to make one promise, and that is in 1 year time, so the following New Year's Eve, for her to come back and see if her prayers were answered and if he really did have the best new year he could. And he makes the promise, but not to show her how good things have been. He makes the promise so that he can show her he has had a terrible, terrible year. And he rips apart the patches and the seams that she had put into his jacket, and for that he gets this, the not good person title card. This guy is trash, and I am very happy to give this to him, the first one in the series. We come back out of this flashback, and George tells David that the promise he made has to be kept, and that he will be bringing him to see Sister Edith. I am almost positive that's not how you pronounce the name, but I have to go with it. When they arrive at her room, we see through another flashback that in the last year, Sister Edith had found David's wife and tried to reunite them together and patch up the family so that he would be on the right path. But David, being a terrible person, ruined that, going as far as attacking the family, not actually hurting anybody, but we find out that David has consumption, which is a really terrible disease back in those times, and that he's like coughing on the children. Who would have thought that 100 years later, people should still be wearing masks? I guess we just really refuse to learn from our mistakes. And I think this is the point in the movie, I think, don't quote me on this, that I put 2 and 2 together, that Sister Edith is dying from consumption that she got from sewing his jacket a year ago. So I immensely do not like David in this movie, even a little bit. As Georges makes himself visible to Sister Edith, she pleads with him. She says, I understand and I'm ready to go. You can take me, but can you just let me live long enough to apologize to this gentleman whose life I feel I made worse by reintroducing him to his wife. This lady is so kind-hearted and blames herself that his list of sins has grown because she reintroduced him to his wife instead of keeping them separate. This lady is an angel as far as I'm concerned, and the world needs more people like her and less people like David. 100% hands down, I will attest to that. I almost just went like full preacher mode and I had to stop myself. So no, I don't want to spoil the ending for you on this movie, but I will say that it is a roller coaster for like the last 15-20 minutes of this movie, where I didn't know what I was rooting for, what I was hoping to happen, how they were gonna, I had no idea what they were gonna do, and it was actually almost a little nerve-wracking. But I think because of that, getting that reaction out of me was exactly what I was looking for. When I went to put this on to watch it for this week's viewing, I really wasn't in the mood for a silent film. But this kind of caught my attention quick and kept it as well all the way up to the final scene, where I really was, even though I didn't like the characters, I was invested in the story. Overall, I definitely say that I like this movie. I'd like to see a newer version or a newer take on it. And even as I was watching it, in my mind, I was thinking of like how I would retell this story. Because it's a really interesting idea, like the concept that it's not whether you're good or bad, it's just your timing determines whether or not you get this job, and then what is that year like for you while you're doing it. I'd almost like to see this story from the carriage driver's point of view instead of just somebody whose soul he was collecting. The movie, I think, did run a little bit longer than it needed to. I think some of the scenes could have been edited shorter. I think they went on longer than they needed to, and it was maybe a little slower and not in a way that progressed the story at all. This was an hour and 47 minutes, and I think at least it could have probably been brought down to an hour and a half. But I'm also making those numbers up. I really did enjoy this. There were a couple of parts that made me question why they shot it a certain way or did it a certain way. but definitely enjoyed this film. And now we are to my favorite part. We're gonna scratch it off. All right, so here we are getting ready to scratch off the Phantom Carriage. Oh, is it just the inverted of this? Or is that completely black? What the? What? Hold on. All right, am I insane? Is that just completely black? Right? That's what a cop out that is. What is? All right, I guess that's what we get. Alright, so that isn't completely black, but that is not much of a picture compared to the ones that I've seen before. But that is the Phantom Carriage. And I was looking at actually I was really giving a look to the whole poster before filming this. And right across the top, coming up, we have Nosferatu, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, Frankenstein, Freaks I'm really excited about. There are some really good classic horror movies on here that I cannot wait to check out. Next Thursday is going to be Nosferatu, so definitely come back and check that out. The next film review we have coming out is going to be for the Patreon exclusive for the $5 tier and higher. It's Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and we're going to have a special guest for that as well. I am super excited about where this is going and some of the movies, actually a lot of the movies on this list. I want to thank you guys again for taking time out of your day to listen to me ramble about movies. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like buttons below and that little bell notification. If any of your friends are in the movies, let them know about it. And a big, huge thank you to my Patreon followers whose names are going to pop up in a second. Thank you very much for having my back and commenting and subscribing to the stuff that I do. It means so much to me. And don't forget about the final title card either. Catch you next Thursday. Later days. So I'm glad that I was able